To have passion in life is everything.
What's your Everest?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
that 200-inch buck?
They just look so impressive when they're wide.
Especially running away.
Welcome to this week's episode of Eastmans Elevated.
It's like a think tank for outdoor activity.
It sounds exactly like my hunting. Just always thinking about it, always trying to evolve it and make it better.
Here's your host, Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? I got a brand new podcast. So this is the second part to the Stephen Rosso podcast. Stephen Rosso, he's just a wealth of knowledge. He was a guide for years, and so he's got so much great insight into grizzly bear safety. We talk about lightning. I think we get into, let's see if I can remember what it's called, like the blue flame or something wild that he saw in the backcountry. That was really interesting. We talk high country mule deer, scouting, just a great conversation through and through. And I just love comparing notes with these guys and seeing the similarities and also seeing the contrasts and being able to discuss it. I learn a lot from them, and it's putting out really good information into the world. So I really enjoyed it. I think you guys will too. Sponsor for today's show is onX. onX is just a great company. They've just changed the way that I hunt and scout. To be able to pull up their onX map systems and to be able to look at topography and aerial imagery and to be able to look at private and public and then all their overlays that they have. They have a Eastmans overlay that has all our MRS section in it. They have overlays for wildfires so you can study hunting the edge of fires or hunting fires after they're a couple years old with all the new growth in them. There's just so much information there, and I'm always learning more about their apps. There's just so much you can do. Your GPS in your phone will still work with the onX system. You catch your maps or save your maps, and then your GPS still works in your phone to show you exactly where you're at. And I like that you can make moves in real time, that I can look at their maps and transpose current information, where I'm seeing mule deer on what face, what slope hillside, and then I can look for that same slope within that mountain range and decide that's the next place I'm going to go. I love scouting on my computer, on my phone. They also have chips for your GPS. Just a great company and a huge asset to us Western hunters and whitetail hunters all over too. Use them as well. I know my buddy Clint Casper is constantly using onX for all his whitetail scouting and hunting in Ohio. So make sure to check them out, and thanks to those guys for sponsoring the podcast. And over there at Eastman's, yeah, we're just all busy getting into our hunts. I know antelope archery starts in Wyoming August 15th. It also starts here in Montana on the 15th of August. So I know all the guys are getting really excited about that. We have some good tags in the office, some good hunts planned. Just got back from that epic Alaska adventure, able to harvest a nice caribou and put it all to film. I can't wait to see the footage all put together and share it with you guys. It's probably some of the best work that I've ever done. It's just amazing. And I'm just getting ready to jump in the truck, headed to Nevada, going to go hunt high country mule deer, my absolute passion and love. So I couldn't be more pumped. Life doesn't get any better for me than hunting season, August, September. Well, I guess it's August through January, but August, September is definitely the prime time month. So I can't wait to see what I'm able to turn up and turn in as far as footage. And I can't wait to see what these other guys put out from Eastman's. They're just so good at it. Dan Picar's videography has just evolved over the years, and I just love the footage that he's putting out on that Beyond the Grid and on Eastman's Hunting TV. So excited to see the season. I better get this podcast rolling so I can load up the truck and get on the road so I'm not driving all at night. But I really appreciate the support, you guys. You'll enjoy this conversation. So second part of me and Stephen Rosso. Here we go.
Yeah, and I mean, like the term we're, a glutton for punishment, I think might just go right coincide with a backcountry hunter. I mean, hands and fists, because one part of you think of these, you look on these things on Google Earth or on a topo map, and it just looks horrible or miserable and steep and nasty. But yet there's that little part of you inside your mind saying, I mean, I'm going to go do this. I'm telling myself it's going to be miserable, but I know I'm going to go do it. And it's so, I think anyone that gets that backcountry hunting bug, punishment is it's something you kind of take pride in when it's all said and done. It's going to hurt and be miserable, but the enjoyment when it's happening, even though you're hating life at some points of it, is, you love what we're doing up here. It's just, every step you take, you're covering country and seeing something new, and you never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, as a backcountry hunter, you have to, in a public land hunter, like it takes a lot of hard work to be successful, and so you have to embrace the suck. You have to embrace the grind, and like my wife always tells me that I love to suffer. It's like and right now I got all my training ramped up, and I'm trail running like a maniac, but and then I'll go on a long trail run in the middle of the day in 95-degree heat because I get to suffer a little bit more, and so you start to kind of almost embrace the suffering. And yeah, it's a big part of these hunts in the backcountry. They're not easy catered hunts. Like if you want that, you're probably going to have to pay for some private property somewhere, because the public land hunting, like you got to learn to embrace that grind and embrace that suffering, and you are going to be miserable at times, downright miserable, wondering what you're doing up there, but you have to continue with the process because the payoff is 10 times of that suffering,
Yeah, and I mean, there's just something about you get on top of the side of a mountain and you're setting up your tent and a mule to your bed as you dig it out to make it big enough for your tent, and wondering what in the hell am I doing up here? But then, daylight comes and that thought is completely gone, and all that's on your mind is how happy you are to be sitting up there, and that's where you want to be.
Yeah, you get a stalk or a play or a close encounter, and it's so thrilling, and that's what keeps us coming back. Like I always, hunting with my kids or new hunters, like you have to almost cater the hunt to them a little bit, and so you don't take them on the most grueling, grinding hunt because they're not going to have fun. But it takes like learning that payoff and that, like being successful on a buck archery hunt or whatever the case is. Like you get that gratifying feeling, and you were successful, and you put all this hard work into it. And pretty soon, like you keep looking for that payoff, and so that keeps you grinding harder and harder and looking for tougher spots. And so you almost gotta, like with kids and new hunters, they gotta see a little bit of that payoff and a little bit of that fun and thrilling close encounter, before you can take them, on more, exerting hunts or, tougher country, or to put more into it. But and I think even as new hunters, like you have to learn that, like you have to feel that payoff and put in some hard work and find a little success, and then that'll drive you to work even harder at it to find it again, to try to recreate it, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have friends that just tell me I'm crazy for taking every weekend of, middle of July on and getting out of work and going straight to the hills until Sunday and beating myself up. And they're like, "You're missing your summer." I'm like, "No, I'm not. This is my summer. That's what I love." I mean, no matter what happens in hunting season, I just love being up in the hills, scouting and looking at animals and seeing them in the velvet. And I mean, I can, one of my favorite things to do here in the winter, we're, working on power lines around here. We're pretty slow in the winter time, unless like a couple years ago when our entire transmission structures blew over, we were pretty busy, but we get plenty of time. We live in one of the best winter environments for animals, and I can watch elk and deer all day long, whether it's in the summer in the high country or on the winter range, just how they interact and everything. I mean, I take that, the enjoyment of just watching those animals, taking pictures of them, just as much as the whole idea of hunting season and chasing after them. But, it's a year-round passion for all of us, everyone that, is probably listening to this, and anyone that reads Eastmans and just social media hunting, all the above. It's a year-round passion. No matter what we're doing, it's our respect for the animals is always at an all-time high.
Yeah, respect and love for them. It is like there's something special at staring through your glass at a wild animal, and you get such an appreciation for the species that you enjoy watching them, and you enjoy watching, cows or does or whatever the case. But then those males, they're so much bigger, the big chest, barrel roll, and all the muscles in them, and like they're the they're the prime of the species, or the top of the species. And then when you see like those in hunting, like we see those giant bucks or those giant bulls that are the exception to the rule, that have lived multiple years in there, that are so challenging to harvest, and we have almost more of an appreciation for them. But to sit and watch like a good buck through the glass, like, or a good bull through the glass, I mean, there is nothing funner on planet Earth. Like, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, especially, right at first light, just holding your breath for the, your first animal, what the first thing in the basin below you. And especially when it's, I've definitely, this is something that I don't know if it was from my years of guiding and all the above, but I am horrible at wanting to hunt the same spot, even if I know it's a great spot and successful. I love seeing new country, exploring new places. And, there's places I've scouted in the past that I know 100% I could go in there and they're going to have a good buck probably in the area. But for me, it's more about the exploration of new country and seeing new things and trying to connect the dots, I guess you could say, from one peak to another. And I really just enjoy that aspect of, I kind of plan my scouting trips out to see new country. And every year I try and open up a little bit more of my knowledge base of different drainages and places, because I think every type of country you cover, you can learn a little something by how the animals interact there that'll just carry on, in your hunting and everything in the future, because certain basins are going to have a different environment than others, low country, high country. I think it can all tie together, especially. And so I just really love connecting the dots and seeing new places. And then there's just that tiny hope, that dream that giant's going to step out. But if he doesn't, I'm still going to have a heck of a time trying to find him whenever I can and all the time.
Yeah, so many correlations. It seems like we're cut from the same cloth. We're explorers by nature. It's fun to explore places. And even, I find an area that I like say a unit that I like. It seems like when I go back to that unit for a second time, I'm not looking in the same locations where I harvested a buck or where I saw one. I might look at if it was dynamite or whatever, but I'm looking at the next spots I can go, like you say, connecting the dots. And I love going to new places and new mountain ranges. And even if I'm successful in a place, I think, well, where am I going to go next year? But I think human nature, we're explorers. It's built into us. We want to see something different. And there's something, it's always going to be challenging to take a mature animal, but there's something so challenging about going into a new place and figuring it out, figuring out where the deer are bedding and where they're feeding and where they're coming out. And when you can figure out a new area and then, be successful there, make a quality play or a quality stock, or, just even figuring out a new place and finding deer in a new place can be a challenge sometimes. But that's so rewarding when you can explore new country and then find bucks in it or bulls in it or your target species in it. I love that as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure, just like about anybody, I spend most of my winters with Google Earth as my number one pull up on my, computer, and it's just a constant, looking over things and just saying that, where could I go next? That looks great. That looks, incredible country. I want to go there, and just doing it. And I've definitely got multiple places I plan on exploring before this season starts that I've never set foot in. And, I could definitely spend more time in places I am comfortable with or I know, and I will turn up good things. But it's definitely the aspect of just exploring and seeing new things, new country, and, hoping for the best. Of course, some of the country I'm looking at is a little bit more in my favorite grizzly zone. So I'm a little hesitant on some of that one because I spent most of my time solo, but I've spent enough time in grizzly country I'm pretty comfortable around them, and especially in the high country, I'm not as worried about them when I can see for quite a bit of distance. But I'm not going to let them prevent me from going and exploring some new areas just because they might be in the area.
I'm with you. Yeah, you can't let it control you. I live in grizzly country. I run in grizzly country every single day. The same trails that Todd Orr got attacked in North Fork of Bear Creek, right in there. Yep. I run that trail constantly. In fact, the year he got attacked, I probably ran it 15 times up that trail. But yeah, you could always get yourself into a bad situation. And I'm like you. I've got a ton of confidence in my skills and in the way that I handle situations. But you could always, Todd is a great woodsman, really knowledgeable. He does trail work all summer long. He's been around grizzly bears. He grew up in this valley. It was just a bad scenario he ran into, and you could always get yourself into that. But yeah, you have to be prepared for those situations, whether it's bear spray or pistol. And the backcountry, it's a scary place. If it isn't grizzly bears, for me, and I'm sure you deal with this in Wyoming too, that those lightning storms are gnarly in the high country, and so, I gotta make sure that I'm not letting those control me as well, making sure that I'm still adventuring out and I'm still hunting. You can't not hunt a place because there's danger there, because there's danger with all backpack hunting, but that's part of the allure to it too. It's part of the fun of it, is the adventure.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that's a really good point on the weather and the lightning. We were last week and on the last night of my trip, we were probably at 10,000, a little over, and we camped off the ridge, obviously, in some little trees. And I mean, there was no weather on the forecast, anything like that. And by about right at dark, a lightning, one of those just typical high country, Western Wyoming lightning storms rolled in. And I mean, I got in my tent and it was lighting me up like daylight, and it was right above us. I mean, it's not a good feeling, but you also don't want to pitch your tent on the top of a peak when there's no trees above you. And, I have a little bit of the electrician in me from working on power lines. You do not want to be the closest thing to that strike. That's for
Man.
sure.
Oh,
But,
right. Yeah,
you
it's
know,
spooky. I had to learn my lesson as a young kid. There was no literature on high country mule deer when I started. I mean, there was a few guys doing it. I wasn't the original or anything, but there wasn't many guys out writing about it, talking about it. It wasn't the information day and age that it is now, and it wasn't as popular. But getting back there, I didn't have very good lightning safety. Like, I had been around lightning storms, and I'd been in some gnarly ones down on the river fishing, and I'd been in some in the mountains, but elk hunting when you can get in the trees and stuff. But that high country stuff, that's a whole different beast. And so, a lot of times I pushed it and I camped on saddles, on high ridge lines, and in
yep.
places that were pretty dangerous. And I started making a lightning plan, and so I'd end up like in the middle of the night, down 500 feet of elevation, riding it out in my raincoat. And finally, like you start to wisen up as you get a little bit older and go, I'm not camping on that top anymore. I'll walk up there, an hour before light to make sure I'm in the right spot, but I have got to camp in a safe spot where I can ride out a storm. But learning those tough lessons, it's so important to keeping yourself safe in the backcountry. And really, in today's day and age, you can learn from podcasts and writing, and you can learn from different things, but really experience is the best teacher. And once you're laying in a tent and it's lighting up like that, and even in a safe spot you feel unsafe,
Yeah.
all of a sudden the next time you set your camp, you're going to think about it. You're going to make sure you're in a good spot.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for people that don't get to hunt the mountains like we do and don't live out here. The people that listen to these podcasts of, all different types, just to learn more about Western hunting, because they're going to draw a tag or they have their first tag. And the weather out here, I've always said I'd love to become a Western weatherman, because you can be right or wrong 50% of the time and you still get a paycheck. It's the only job you can possibly do that. And, you can look, I've been up here and, hiking these Western Wyoming mountains and up on top where the entire forecast for 10 days doesn't even have like a 10% chance of rain. And then a storm of all storms will come in on you 2 nights later that, it has its Mother Nature out here has its own weather cycle, and you can never plan for it not to happen. And you always got to plan for it to happen. And the last thing you want to be obviously is caught when you don't want to be. So I always definitely, through my years as well, growing up in central Idaho, backpacking in the Sawtooths and everything, I seen a lot of lightning storms there and learned a lot as a young kid hiking with my parents that has definitely, carried over into how I set up my camps and kind of how I look at where I want to camp on the mountain. And I always like to camp up high to where I can be right out of my tent glassing in the mornings on scouting trips especially. But, I definitely kind of think about it a lot more, because I don't want to be caught trying to run my camp down the mountain in the middle of a rainstorm at midnight because I was just trying to push an extra 200 feet of altitude,
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and you do, being a high country mule deer hunter, you want to sleep as high on the mountain that you can be safe, and you get to be part weatherman when you are in the backcountry. You're reading clouds and which way they're moving through and taking tabs on them. And the other thing is, you don't want to get stuck on a stalk on a buck way up there too when a storm rolls in. I've had that happen a couple times. Like, even on a stalk, if I ditch my pack and I go light, I always have my rain jacket. Even if it's clear blue sky, I'll have my rain jacket tied around my waist or in my pocket or whatever the case is, because I've just been caught out in it too much. And it's like that, you could get hypothermia pretty easy, but the most dangerous stuff is that lightning in the high country. It's just a different beast than being in the safety of your car or in your home, or even the safety of the valley floor. Like, up on those peaks, it's just a different beast up there.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, as the popularity of it grows, and luckily we live in the age where from where it was 10, 20 years ago in terms of backpacks, clothing, all the tools we utilize to get it up in the high country, lightweight tents, sleeping bags, all that. we're in an age where it is just such, it's at an exponential growth in terms of how great we're getting it, because these companies are coming out with such incredible stuff, and it's enabling people that normally might not think of being in these places. They're able to get there, which is great because it's growing the sport and growing people's chance to, do these things. But it also, people that have never spent much time in the mountains really need to take into effect. There's so much that can go wrong in the mountains very quickly that you do need to be prepared for if it's just not something you're used to.
Man, isn't that the truth? It's so evident when you get in the mountains, and yeah, you're backcountry savvy. The decisions you make directly affect your safety, and you have to always be thinking. Also when you're setting camps, like more during elk season, but you also got to look for widowmakers. You got to look for big branches or big trees. Never want to sleep in a burn or anything like that. I've seen more trees fall in those burns, and but that wood savvy and wood sense, you're right. If you're not used to it, I always say the first 3 rules of backpacking, or the first 3 rules of backpack hunting, is safety, safety, and safety. Like, you got to think of that stuff, because your safety is directly related to the decisions you make, and if you haven't spent hundreds of days in the wilderness, is a lot of what it takes is a lot of experience in the wilderness and running into these different bad scenarios, and being able to count on your wood sense to make good decisions. But yeah, I mean, if I was a new hunter out west, like, I'd hate to start over from scratch, like where I started, whether it was 20 years ago when I moved to Montana or whatever the case is. Like, I was a moron half the time. I don't know how in the heck I survived a lot of that. But I learned those hard lessons, and I got smarter, and I got better, and I got my wood savvy, and now I make smart decisions. But yeah, definitely if you're coming out on a hunt out west, like, make sure that you're gathering all the information, and that you take into account the hurdles or difficulties that you might find, or what Mother Nature can throw at you, and be prepared and make smart decisions, because yeah, there isn't a help button back there. Maybe there is with these alarms nowadays, but really you have to rely on yourself back there to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's a great point you brought up about burns, because a lot of, that's a big thing. People look for burns that have happened in the past 2 to 3 years for places to go look for animals, because it's phenomenal. The forage regenerates and we get amazing growth. And, especially around here, there was some big burns here a couple years ago, and I'm definitely going to go do some scouting in one of them this year and look for stuff. And it's the scariest place I have ever been on the back of a horse was pulling pack strings in the Frank Church through the burn, because the Frank Church is always burnt. But, a windstorm, we were, I think, setting a bear bait quite a ways from our base camp, and we were up high on a ridge at like 10,000 feet. We went up this trail, perfectly cleared, great trail. Coming back down, a windstorm picked up, and I was watching trees tip over in front of us. We probably had 20 trees alone across the trail coming down, and they were still coming down with this wind. And I mean, there is nothing scarier than being at the whim of Mother Nature and 80-foot trees coming down, and it's I think that's a very good point for people that, think of hunting burns and stuff. You got to think of where you set up a camp, where you're doing anything, because if wind comes up at all, and I've really heard, after that initial burn, about 3 to 5 years, after that initial burn happens, that's when the main majority of trees and the root systems give out, and that's when they really start coming down. And you got to think about it, because that tree might look sturdy in the ground, but just a gust of wind, there's no root system that you can't tell is there, and that's when things can really go bad in those burns.
Oh, you're so right. It's so scary. I've been scared in the daylight, like you were on that horse, like scared in the daylight, and I'm in the middle of this huge burn where, I don't know, maybe takes 6 miles to get out from either direction, and I'm in the middle, and the wind comes up, and trees are falling all over the place, and they're so loud. Like the wilderness is so quiet by nature, and you can kind of hear the wind, and all of a sudden there's this huge crash, and this tree falls, and maybe it's a couple hundred yards away from you, and then all of a sudden you hear another one, and so pretty soon you're looking up and you're watching all the trees. But yeah, that is really spooky. So yeah, definitely gotta watch out for those. Watch out for windstorms. The burns are horrible for those, but even the high country woods up there, like you can get some storms. I had one come in Nevada where, I mean, it was knocking trees over and branches down, and Montana too, like with 100-mile-an-hour winds. Like, you really got to look where your camp's at, and just make sure you don't have a tree that's leaning over your tent, because that'll kill you as quick as anything.
Right, and like it's one thing. A lot of times you can find a nice flat spot at the base of these trees, especially when you're in these steep high country mountains where flat is a very hard thing to find. But you got to make sure it's the right tree to be camping under, because the last thing you want to do is hear that crack out of your ear in the middle of the night, because unfortunately it's definitely happened in the past, and it's something no one wants to have that scenario brought upon them, and it's a freak of nature type thing. But that all goes into just that aspect of the little things of safety that it's almost, for those of us that have done it for so long, it just kind of comes naturally now, because it's just ingrained in you. You look at something, that's how we think. But for the people that don't get to do this type of hunting, all that, they just, it's something they do need to think about, because that's just not something they would consider, because they're considering so many other things into their hunt that they need to do to make it go right. The last thing they're thinking about is the fact a tree branch could break off because it's cracked above them.
Yeah, you're so right. Well, and it's so eye-opening too when you first experience that. Like we drive, and that's dangerous, and you could die in a car wreck, but gosh, when you're in a dangerous situation like that in the backcountry, that is really spooky. Like it scares the heck out of you when you're back there. Your heart's beating fast, and you don't quite know what move to make when you're in one of those scenarios, when you don't have a lot of experience, or when you first encounter them. So yeah, definitely something to prepare yourself for mentally. And then they say it comes second nature to us guys that have been in the woods a while, but still we got to keep our wits about us too, and make sure we're making good decisions. And that's another thing too. Like we talked about hunting with a buddy. That's another thing you got to be careful of, is hunting with a buddy is good. You can push each other, but you definitely don't want to let your buddy push you into a bad situation or a bad scenario. Like you have to think for yourself back there, and you definitely don't want to let your hunting partner down. But if it's something that you don't feel comfortable with, you need to have a discussion about it and state your point and say, no, man, I don't feel comfortable camping here. I don't feel comfortable on that stock. But you got to make sure your voice is heard. Don't get like. We can get a little headstrong in the mountains, all of us, and not that you have a bad hunting buddy that's trying to get you into a bad scenario, but you just got to keep your sense about you, and make sure you're making smart decisions and not getting, peer pressured into something.
Yeah, and I mean, and all those things get exemplified when, like, for you and I hunting in grizzly country a lot. I've talked to quite a few, people that are, have seen that I have spend a lot of time in grizzly country, and they reach out just asking some very basic questions on, could they're planning a hunt that are going to be in grizzly country. And I mean, the number one thing I can say when you're going to be in bear country, black bears can be just as dangerous as a grizzly, but everyone, you hear the name grizzly, it makes immediately, raises the hair on the back of your neck, because they're just, they are something to see and behold in the wilderness and everything. But the biggest thing I can say is, having that clean camp and camping in a smart spot where you can see surroundings, not camping in a tiny little section that might be off the trail that seems safe to you, but you want to be able to see what you're doing, especially in that bear country, because if you're coming back to camp, you're hunting out in the dark every night. You're coming back after dark a lot of times. You don't want to be coming through thick trees into your camp where your flashlight can't hit a big bodied animal that might be sitting next to your tent. So, a lot of that gets definitely amplified when you're talking bear country out here in, Montana, western Idaho, or eastern Idaho and western Wyoming.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. So I definitely like the open country, like you're saying, and being able to view bears and like stay out of their way or get out of you just avoid that encounter. I've always thought with bears, like you just don't want to get into that inside 100 yards where they have to choose to fight or flight. You want to see them a ways off, and then be able to give them a wide berth and give them their space in their country, and not surprise them or not not interfere with what they're doing. And same thing when I run into a bear, even if I am at 100 yards, like I'm not going to shout at him right away. Like I'm going to try to sneak out of there, not give him my wind, not let him know I'm there. And when I start to shout or wave my arms is when he recognizes me and starts to come at me. But yeah, the only thing that I would say is different, or a way that I think about things too, like you were talking the thick cover. like sometimes I almost like to camp in the thick cover because I figure that's not where grizzly bears are moving through. They're moving through main ridge lines and main trails. Like I feel like if I can get in that thick stuff, like I'm going to hear them coming through the branches, and I also feel like it's off the beaten path, kind of where there's nothing for them in there. There's no grass, no food, thick cover, tough to walk in. I feel like they're not gonna get in there and into my camp. But I definitely agree with you doing all the small stuff, hanging your food every night, never eating in your tent, eating away from where you're sleeping, keeping a clean camp. It's so important in grizzly bear country, and really if you follow those basic rules, like they are so powerful and they're so intimidating, but they're not monsters. Like the majority of them that you run into, they run away from you like a white-tailed deer. It's only those 100%. Select few that get a bad attitude, trying to protect a carcass, sowing a cub, or they smell food or something like that, where you get a bad bear that'll come in that'll be a little ornery. But for the most part, they don't want anything to do with you either.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, those years I guided up in the wilderness north of here, I mean, we ran into bears consistently all the time. And we, our wall tent camp, we had 3-strand electric fence that was powered by deep cell boat batteries. It pushed 11,000 volts when we turned it on at night. And I mean, I'd wake up to bears hitting that fence, growling and barking, and then they'd go try it in a different spot. And, we had this little old cabin that was built up in the trees that we'd store meat in for hunters. And we had electric fence around it. We also had 1-inch steel bar across the door twice through 1-inch steel eyelets. And we had a grizzly for 2 years who caused us absolute hell. And he learned that he could rip the fence down with just one swipe. He just needed to take one shock. One night I woke up at like 3 a.m. and it was just, I was completely out of it from just months of guiding summer pack trips and then going into hunting season. You're just sleep deprived. So you're kind of in that la la land of waking up at 3 a.m. And I heard the sound and I felt like I was dreaming. I was like, that almost sounds like a bear's on the roof ripping through the logs. And then it clicked. A bear was on the roof ripping through the logs. And we ran out of the tent and put a flashlight on him, and he was pulling a 100-pound elk quarter right out through the roof of the cabin. And, he wasn't a bad bear because anytime he was around people, when we showed up at him, he took off running. He was just an absolute nuisance.
Yeah. Oh, but man, that is spooky.
They're just incredibly smart animals. And, I think people don't give them the credit for how smart they are. I put a trail cam up on that spot after that to see what he was doing. And I have pictures of him after we redid the electric fence to make it wider and did a bunch of things. And he lays down in front of the cabin and just stares at it for like an hour where he's just thinking. And that was kind of an eerie feeling to think how much effort he was putting into figuring out how he was going to get in there.
Oh, that's eerie. Yeah, no, I don't like that one bit. Yeah, I notice bears a lot. They start to recognize or realize where there is a permanent camp, where there is a food source. I know like an outfitter camp here in our valley,
yeah.
like constantly gets hit with bears. Where us backpackers that are always kind of moving, those bears aren't looking to get into our tents or to get our granola bar that's all wrapped in plastic that's hanging up in a tree 30 feet. But those camps that are used year after year where they do a lot of cooking in them, or like you say, elk quarters, they can smell that. They smell, what is it? I think I stated it wrong that they can smell 100 times what a bloodhound is. I think it's 7 times what a bloodhound is. But yeah, a bloodhound, like a kidnapped kid that drives in a car, a bloodhound can follow where that car drove. Like, what can a grizzly smell? Like, they can tell time with their nose. They can smell like how fresh a kill is, or if you got a bunch of bacon grease, you can guarantee that bear can smell it. And they're curious, like you say, and intelligent, So yeah, you definitely want to keep as clean a camp as you can to avoid that conflict with them.
Yeah, and for me, I've definitely in my time around them just noticed that, I'm really less worried about them in the summer and early archery. It's once the snow hits the ground, especially in October, that's when I actually really pay attention to how they're acting if I come up on them, because they're in that mode of going into hibernation, whereas earlier they're just not in that survival mode yet. And I've never really had issues in early season. And then my summer pack trips, we didn't pack an electric fence or anything, and we had a full kitchen tent with stove and everything. And I'd wake up with I always had a wrangle horse tied up because we'd kick the herd loose at night and to feed and graze. And there was times I'd wake up and there'd be grizzly tracks in between my tent and the wrangle horse, and it just walked right through camp. Of course, you never tell the clients that are sleeping in their tents that happened. You kind of walk and kick all the tracks pretty quick in the dirt. But they're definitely not the monsters that people ingrain in their head, especially people that don't get the chance to be around them like we do. But if you're hunting that later season, rifle season, October, you really do got to be careful what you're doing. And if you're so worried about it, there's lightweight fence options for backpack hunters that weigh like 2 to 4 pounds. For me, if I'm going to be hunting in an area I know is really, really thick with grizzlies, I'm hands down taking a fence. If it's that later season stuff, if it's going to make me sleep at night, that's going to, because if you're not sleeping at night because you're so worried about every stick that breaks outside your tent, you're going to be miserable on the hunt and just so fatigued. You're not going to be able to think straight or make big stalks. So, a lot of that aspect, the extra weight during, for something like that, for someone who's considering hunting in grizzly country is 100% worth it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you made some really good points there. So I hadn't put that together with bears that were getting ready to hibernate later into the fall, like into that October, were more dangerous to be around. But that's a great tip. And then also, the electric fence and those packable ones. So, I wasn't so sold on those things or sure about those things, but Cole Kramer that hunts those Kodiak brown bears, He was telling me about them too and how well they work. So now that's two trusted sources that tell me how well they work. So that's interesting. Yeah, I had to bring those in. So being an electrician, is there anything you could do to is there like an invention you could do to make your tent lightning proof?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, that'd be nice. I definitely deal with the high voltage stuff with power lines, but we haven't figured out how to corral it yet. That's the scary thing about electricity is, our job is just to try and get it to everybody's house and keep your lights on or restore them when they go off. But if we knew how to harness electricity as well as we want to without it causing problems, we'd be a lot better off. But that's what's so scary about lightning is you'd never know.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, you never know. Well, I was thinking about it like a house. Like a house is grounded, right? And so lightning, right. It's not supposed to strike your house because you've got this. Like, can you explain that better to me? Because I'm gonna butcher this as I start to explain it.
Yeah, with lightning or anything, you have to, electricity is always trying to find its biggest route to ground, closest route and easiest access to ground. And, that's how you get electrocuted or anything like that. From our aspect, working on power lines, the most dangerous thing you can do is put yourself in the path of electricity that wants to get to ground. And that's how people in our industry get killed every year. And, with lightning, when you see those big strikes, they're going all the way to ground, whether that's through a tree or not. And the scary thing for us is a human body is 70 or more % water. We are a perfect conductor for electricity. We have very little resistance in our body. So when electricity is looking for the easiest route to ground, it's going to choose us over other avenues. So when you have like your house, if it gets struck, you have numerous copper ground rods going out of your house from when they build it and put in your electric service that ground it out. So that's what copper is, an amazing conductor. So electricity will follow that instead of going into the house to find that route to ground. So, if you were in the mountains, I guess, one aspect you could think of is, if you were really truly worried about it, would be trying to run copper from like your tent poles and dig into a copper, a ground rod. But the chance of it working with high voltage like that is just probably not going to happen.
Okay. That was my $1 million idea, as a lightning proof tent that I haven't told anybody about.
It might be there. The technology's probably getting there.
That's funny. No, it's so interesting. Yeah, no, and lightning is, you just get into a safe spots, like the low spots. And, I like to get into, I like to be in the trees, usually smaller groups of trees, not by the biggest one, just because I'm not the tallest thing out there. I'm trying to find low spots and so that's, and also staying off the ridge lines, the peaks, when it's coming in, the high spots. I've seen lightning, like I think some rocks, it's drawn to it, and I've seen lightning strike the same rock on the same peak 3 or 4 different times in one storm, which is pretty wild. You definitely wouldn't want to be sitting there during a storm.
No, definitely not. And that's just, it's weird how the electrons and neutrons, protons, the whole, that aspect of chemistry, going that far back, that's how it all works. It's an imbalance of charges, and the negative attracts the positive, and that's how basically lightning is formed, is a difference in charges, and then it eventually jumps, and that's what creates your spark and shoots it from the sky to the ground. And so, it's maybe an imbalance in the ground in that specific spot that just creates it in that area more than others, and that's why they hit it. And I remember years ago in the Sawtooth, when I was way young, hiking with my dad, we were at the top, going towards the top of a big peak, and it was kind of getting cloudy, but we hadn't seen any lightning, and we got to the top, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, the phenomenon is called St. Elmo's fire. And it was basically, it looked like a blue haze around this top rock on the peak. And my dad saw that and basically grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and dragged me off the mountain. But it basically, I mean, as I grew up and kind of learned more about it, that's exactly what it was. That was the static charge building. And it wasn't too long before lightning started. And the first one was the top of that mountain.
Wow, that's
so
wild.
If you see that blue haze or fuzz, and I mean, it truly is a visible blue, it's just very weird. It's kind of eerie to see, but if you see that, you just turn and run.
Man, that's wild. What did you call it again? Something fire?
Fire is kind of what I've always heard it as.
Gotcha. That is wild. Yeah, so it's a blue haze. You can actually see the electricity in the air around that spot, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I was way young, and I've never seen it since, and I think it's a pretty rare thing to come across, but we knew to get the heck off the mountain pretty quick when we saw it.
Okay, yeah, that's wild. Amazing some of the things you see being in the wilderness, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, from, animals and all the above to just nature in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stephen, man, I've really enjoyed talking to you. This is a great conversation. I could have you on here for a couple hours, no problem. But I think we should check back in after season and see how your season was. We'll connect and kind of talk about our trials and tribulations, successes, and hopefully not too many failures.
Yeah, no, sounds good. We don't want anybody to have to be on an 8-hour road trip to listen to us, because I'm sure we could keep talking for plenty of time.
For sure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I really enjoy your Instagram page. So your Rosso _ Wyoming, or is it
just YO?
YO, okay. Yeah, you have a great Instagram page. Yeah, I'm psyched that you're writing for the blog. I got to go back and check out a couple of those articles. But, man, I just really appreciate you being on and having an authentic conversation with me.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. And it's been fun. I always love talking high country mule deer and anything and everything that has to do with the backcountry with everyone.
Yes, absolutely, right? All right. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Much appreciated.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Really fun conversation with Stephen. I think I could have talked to him for half a day about backcountry hunting, and I might in the near future too. We got to get him back on and talk about his hunts this season. I know he's got some great deer hunts planned and some great elk hunts planned. That bighorn sheep story was absolutely amazing. Hunting him in I think it was Hell's Canyon in there. Just wild, the effort that it took to kill that ram. I just love hearing those stories. They motivate me, they inspire me, and that's what it takes, is just next level effort, and that always seems to pay off in the long run. It doesn't pay off every day or every hunt, but in the long run it pays off in consistent success. So thanks to Stephen for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it, really enjoyed it. Sponsor for today's show is onX Maps. So onX has just changed the way I scout and hunt. You guys hear me talk about it all the time. If they weren't a sponsor, I'd still be talking about onX. I absolutely love their program. I love the aerial imagery. I love the topography, private, public. It lets you hunt with confidence. You know where you're at on property. You know the exact lines that you can hunt, the borders that you can hunt, and you can see it in real time. You can still use your phone and the onX app, even if you don't have cell coverage. Your GPS will still work. You just save or catch your maps, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I saved all my maps for Alaska, used onX, pretty much the whole time, and doing the same thing here in Nevada. Catch my maps. I have a couple more to save here before I pull out of the driveway, but saved all my maps there. I have locations marked. I have vantage points marked. You're just able to dissect the country so much better than other programs, or you're able to dissect it in real time. So I really appreciate onX for sponsoring the podcast. They just put out a great product. And yeah, over there at Eastman's, barely checking in with the guys here and there over there. I know they're busy with their hunts and I'm busy with mine. But we're going to get together here and record some podcasts after the season. They should be just some great ones, as I know those guys got some really high quality hunts. So really excited for that. I know we're just pushing out the magazines, writing another article for Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal that's going to be a good elk article. I'm excited to write and get out to you guys. And yeah, we're this Alaska trip. Gosh, the footage from this is just insane. It's some of the best stuff I've ever done. I can't wait to share it with you guys. So excited to see that footage put together. Excited to get over to Nevada here and just keep things rolling. But yeah, thanks to Eastman's for everything they do and their support on the podcast, the magazine, the filming. I just have this amazing opportunity, and I just wanna make the most of it. And put out the absolute best content I can. So make sure to check them out. If you're not a subscriber, make sure to check out Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal and Eastman's Hunting Journal. And with that, I think I've got all my work done. I think I'm going to hop in the truck and get down the road to Nevada. It's going to be a hot hunt down there. I know temperatures, they'll be a little bit cooler up around 10,000 feet, but it's still going to be a warm weather hunt. And so I've been training a lot with heat training, with doing my runs in the hottest part of the day, and a lot of sauna work and getting ready for it. But it's a backpack hunt, which I just absolutely love, and in some of the most pristine country the West has to offer. So fortunate to have the tag, and again, just want to make the most of that as well. But I really appreciate all the support from you guys on the podcast and social media and through Eastman's. It really means the world to me. The comments that you guys leave me, or the personal messages about your success. I just got one the other day, bear success, and attributed a lot of it to the podcast, which is just great. It just means the world to me. I just want to keep sharing next level information and help you guys on your path to finding success and enjoying the outdoors, and do the best job I can do, and from there let the cards fall where they may. But yep, thanks you guys. I appreciate it. I'll check in with you guys next week, hopefully with a big Nevada muley.